Good morning, 1250. I hope you're all doing well. I can't say it enough. I miss you all so much. I wish I could check in on you on the daily to see how everything is going, not just with Photoshop, but in life in general. So shoot me a message. Let me know how you guys are doing. I wanted to outline what the rest of the semester is going to look like. And we are going to take a look at the final project, an exercise for today, and InDesign in this lecture. After this lecture, I'll be posting at least one more lecture that goes over text, and possibly one more to address any questions that you guys might have. So starting off, there is a new assignment that you guys can find, and it is the intro to InDesign, and I haven't posted it yet, but it looks like this. So InDesign Image Import and Final Overview. I've opened that one up, and this will help explain what you need to learn in order to finish up your final project. And your final project has been posted. So on your final project, there's a list of all the different things I'm looking for. In a nutshell, you guys are going to create a design board, and you can choose if you want it to be a 24 by 36 or 11 by 17, and you can decide if it's going to be horizontal or vertical. It's completely up to you. There's also going to be a booklet. Now, instead of going through each one of these requirements, I thought it would be better if I opened up some examples from previous classes so you guys could see what we'll be doing in this class. So to begin, we're all going to do a design board similar to this. So this is really similar to the dollhouse project that you've done, and it's continuing off of that idea. Now for this final, I let you guys choose your own client. So it could be yourself. You could go ahead and do a design board for a room in your own home. It could be for a friend or family member. I've even seen some people go so far as to do a design board for a celebrity that they really like, which is pretty funny. So this part of the project, the actual design board, you can create in Photoshop. I think everything should look familiar here. But one thing that I would suggest is to go ahead and Photoshop all of these elements in separate files and then bring them together. For example, this chair right here, maybe you could save it as, side chair, and then bring it into your Photoshop file. And you could do table, and then bring it into your Photoshop file. And the reason why I want you guys to work on these separately before you bring them together is that in addition to your design board, you're also going to be creating a booklet. And this is what the booklet looks like. This booklet is intended for your client so that you can show them all of the different pieces that go into your design board. And it includes, the name and the brand of the piece, the dimensions, as well as the price. And what we're looking to do in this is to also provide them with some alternates, so that if there's something that's not available, that you can provide some alternates for your client. Let me show you a couple different examples. So here is another example of the board. And most of this was done in Photoshop, the board. So this image right here. After this image was done, the student then brought it into InDesign to lay it out like a poster and put text on it. I think that's the biggest difference between the two programs. You typically don't want to be adding text to your Photoshop files. It doesn't render well. And then the other thing that Photoshop doesn't do is multi-page documents. So for example, our booklets we couldn't do in Photoshop. That's why we're introducing InDesign. Again, one, to introduce text to our work, and then the other part is to do multi-page documents. So this is the student's board, and then what he did is in his booklet, let me show you a full page scroll. this is the layout for the book. And the way that the books are exported, hopefully you can see my cursor dancing around, is it's what's called a two-page spread. So I'm going to go back up to the first page. If you can imagine a book is closed, when you open it, this is what it looks like. So InDesign lets you export it so that you can do what's called a two-page book layout. And now you can see there's the sofa with a couple options. And the reason why we want to provide options to our client is, one, they may not be in love with one of the options that we gave them. There could also be budget restraints, so you could do different price points. And then sometimes what happens is, even if they love the piece of furniture, they can afford it, it might be a matter of availability. So maybe a sofa is like 6 months out before it's available, or they stopped production on it. So having some alternates is always a good idea. I'm going to go through a few more of these final project examples to give you an idea of what I'm looking for. So I'll quickly go through these, and then as you're watching this YouTube video, what you can do is pause on all these different projects. So here's another example of the board. And then I'll show you how it's broken down in the booklet. Okay. Oops. So this one wasn't submitted as a two-page view, unfortunately. But you can see all the different alternates to the pieces of furniture. Okay. Here's another example. So I will show you the board first. This is a great rendering. This is the first time I've seen a student actually try to render some sort of perspective in their view, which was kind of cool. Not expecting that, just wanted to show you different things. And then this is how it translated into her book. So you can see some of the pieces along with alternates. There's the main piece with some alternates as well. So again, to kind of break this down, let me come up to this example, or any of them. She went into Photoshop and masked this chair so it could be on its own. And then she imported this chair into InDesign, because InDesign allows you to do these frames, to add text, and also do multi-page documents. And then using those same pieces, in Photoshop, she went ahead and made this layout to show what the overall space would look like. Let's do one more example. So here's the board. So a different approach. There's a rendered view, and then there's some of the different alternates off to the side. And then in her booklet, here are some examples. So I hope that helps you get an idea of what I'm looking for the final project. Again, in a nutshell, it's going to be a design board and then a booklet to support all of the different pieces that you found, along with some alternates. Again, it's all laid out in the final project, and you can come back to this video to get some more inspiration for that as well and look at these examples. So what I'd like to do today, now that you kind of see where we're going with the final project, is I want to talk about InDesign for the first time. We haven't used InDesign before. In your Creative Cloud, you will see a program called InDesign. It's a pink and purple logo, ID. And today we're going to be focusing on importing images. And then I'm also going to go over how to insert text and some graphic editing as well. I wanted to start with images just because the previous lectures that I had that I could have shared with you have changed quite a bit because InDesign changed its workspace, but it still is just like Photoshop, so hopefully it's familiar to you. But again, if you take a look at this list, this is what I'm following along with. As you go through the lecture, you can pause and then come back to this list to make sure we got everything. So to start off, what I'd like you all to do is to go through and import the images that you need in the Images for InDesign Import folder. In the assignment, I've kind of given you a graphic map on where you can find that. So if you are in our class homepage, or really anywhere, if you click on Files, and then come here to the right, you'll see a folder called Images for InDesign Import. You will see 5 files that you'll need to download somewhere that we can use. There are 3 JPEGs, 1 PDF, and 1 PSD. So make sure you save those somewhere in a folder that you can easily come back to and find. We'll be using them to import into InDesign. So at this point, go ahead and pause and get these downloaded so that we can hop into InDesign. So I guess 2 things. Pause, launch InDesign and get these downloaded and come back to the lecture. I'll meet you guys in InDesign when you come back. Okay. Hopefully you guys hit pause and came back. So I'm here in InDesign and I hope this workspace looks really familiar because it's a sibling to Photoshop. They are both Adobe products. So even this screen I hope looks familiar. If you are familiar with Photoshop, you can go to Print, Web, and Mobile, just like you can in Photoshop. For our class, we'll be using Print, and you can also hit this View All Presets, and you can see more presets. And if you remember from just a couple minutes ago, I said for the final we'll be working on an 11 by 17 or a 24 by 36. So looking here, there is an 11 by 17. It's called the tabloid wide. But if you wanted to do the larger 24 by 36, you can always come up here just like Photoshop and you can make it 36 inches wide and 24 inches high. Okay. While we're here, I'm also going to point out that there is the Facing Pages option. Now this is for our book layout. I'll go over that more in just a bit, but for now I'm going to switch back to the 11 by 17. And I'm going to make it landscape, so the long way. You can kind of flip it back and forth here. And I'll go ahead and make it facing pages to start. And then everything else, including the margins, I'm going to go ahead and keep as the default. And then once I'm done, once you're done, go ahead and click this blue Create button. And you should see a preview of your piece of paper or your layout in InDesign. Now before we get too much further, I wanted to first work on our workspace setup. Okay, that's the first thing that I would like to do. So if you take a look at our list, I have creating and editing a new InDesign layout, which we just did. So this is our layout. But now I want to edit the workspace because again, they changed our workspace. So there are these expanded panels. And there's a few things that I would like to add. So properties and pages are both really important. But what I'd like you guys to do first, there's this button right here. It looks like 2 sideways arrows. Go ahead and click on that so it collapses the icons. Now, these tend to take up a lot of room on your screen, and so I want to make sure we have as much real estate as possible, especially if you're working on a laptop. So after you've done that, go ahead and click and hold on pages and pull it out to the side. And as you can see, it pulls it out of here. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to click on pages, so click and hold. And when you move it, bring it down towards the bottom. Hopefully this works with the way my screen is set up, but I want to make it so that it goes in the middle of this menu here. I actually might have to pull out the whole thing. The way that I've cut off my screen to do the recording, if you see where I am right now, it's actually not letting me go all the way down to the bottom, unfortunately. So what I might have to do, I'm going to pull this out entirely, and then I'm going to see if I can trick it and pull it back in, and maybe even put it on top. So here they are side by side. If we have to work like that, we will, but I would ideally like them stacked on top of one another. So I'm going to try to pull this one out. I might have to pause my lecture and come back. Since I'm missing the bottom of my screen, I can't expand this the way I want. So you'll have to excuse me for just a moment if I do need to pause. If you look on my right side, you can see that it's filling up. And typically I can come in and make it a little bit smaller. Let's see if I can do it this way. I'll try one more time. And I'm just barely short of adding it to the bottom. All right, let me go ahead and pause and I'll be right back. If not, we'll do it side by side. But in the meantime, go ahead and try to get yours either side by side or stacked so you can see them both at the same time. All right, I am back. So here is the best way to do it. And again, you'll have to forgive me. This interface has only been out for about 4 months. I've only had to change it a couple times. So I got it to work by putting pages back in. So I'm going to pop pages back in here. And then after that, when we first started, I had you guys collapse the icons. Go ahead and expand the panels this time. So you can see where I'm hovering and it says expand. Click on that again. And what I did, let me go back to how it looked before. So you can see that now these three are stacked on top of each other. And I don't want to have to keep clicking through these things. So rather, what I'd like to do is take the Pages menu, and now if you pull it down towards the bottom, do you see how mine is now highlighting in blue? As soon as I see that blue line on the bottom, I can let go. And now I've got it so that properties and pages are stacked on top of each other. This is the view that I would like so that you can see the page that you're working on as well as the properties. But now when I collapse it, you can see that they go back to being stacked again. So expanded allows us to stack, but then collapsing it makes it so that we need to click on each one individually. So this is how I'd like you guys to work. So if you need to, again, go ahead and pause. You can even rewind and see how you can change these so that they are stacked on one another. Now, if you ever lose your properties or your pages panel, you can always come up to the top of your screen, and I'm sorry if it's cut off, but if you look at the top of your screen right now, you will see Window as an option, and you can see that I have pages and properties selected. Now, eventually, we will also add a few more menus. We'll be adding some type and table menus, but for now, properties and pages is just fine to get us started. So again, go ahead and pause, get that set up, and then we'll come right back and talk about saving in InDesign. Okay, what I'd like to do is save this document so that you can come back and continue working on it. And I think it's really straightforward. You'd want to go to File, and again, I'm sorry if that's cut off, but File and then Save As, or you can just hit Control S or Command S. So I'm going to hit Command S, and it's going to ask me where I'd like to put this. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in my SLCC folder. I'm going to make a new folder and call it InDesign, just to make it a little bit easier for us. And I'm going to call this InDesign Example. And this is something that you'll turn in, InDesign Exercise, so that I can see that you were able to work on it. So again, InDesign Exercise, and then save. Pretty straightforward. Before we move along from here, I wanted to let you know that even though this file is saved, you typically don't send people InDesign files. So for example, just like if you were working in AutoCAD, you don't necessarily send your clients AutoCAD files because they don't have the programs to open it. So most people don't have InDesign. And even if they do have InDesign, like for example, you guys know that I have InDesign, if you wanted to send me a file, I still wouldn't be able to view it properly. I'll tell you why in just a bit, but for now, just know that you don't save or send people InDesign files. Typically, when you are done working in something, you export it as a PDF or a JPEG, and that's the work that you send people. So just to recap, you typically don't send or share InDesign files, but you send them JPEGs or PDFs of the work or layout that you've created. Okay, so now that we have this first page here and it's saved, we can see it's called InDesign Exercise. If we go to our pages, we can see that there's one page. Now, if I wanted you guys to work on a booklet, you guys know that that's going to be more than one page. And to add pages, it's really simple. There's this plus sign down here. It's really similar to the layers icon in Photoshop. When I hit that plus sign, you can see that it's adding pages here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, I click it again, there's 5. So the simplest way of adding pages is this plus sign. What you can also do, let's say if you know you need 20 pages and you don't want to keep hitting the plus sign, you can right click on pretty much anywhere and you'll see insert pages. You can see the menu slightly change depending on whether I click in the gray area or the paper. But if you go to insert pages, you can see that you can put 20 pages. You can even designate where it goes. You can put it at the end, after a certain page, at the start. So this is a great way to quickly add many pages if you need to. I'll click OK on that. And now I've got 25 pages. So I don't necessarily need 25 pages to start, so I'm going to hit Control Z. And I will just stick to these 5 pages here. So coming back up to the top, I'm going to talk again about the book layout. Okay, so with the book layout, this is the first page in my document, which is typically referred to as a cover. And if it helps, go ahead and open up a book or imagine opening up a book. So here's my cover. So that means that this page is the back side of my cover. And this truly is the first page of the document. This is the back of the second page. Sorry, this is the back of the first, page that's not the cover, second page, and then if I added another page, it would be back of that page too. So hopefully you can see that. So that's something that's really powerful in InDesign, is you can see how the entire book layout lays out in front of you. So in your final project, when you're doing your booklet for your client, this is how I'd like you to set it up so you can see those pages side by side. Let's say that you started your document and you can't remember how to make your page, or you forgot to make it a book layout. What you can do is go to Layout at the top, and then, not Layout, go to File, and then Document Setup. So again, to change any of these, you go to File, Document Setup, and then from here, you can see that you can deselect facing pages. I'm going to click on Preview, and you can automatically see it changed it to single pages. If I turn facing pages back on, as long as Preview's on, I can see that automatically. Now in the same menu, let's say that you decided you don't like the 11 by 17. Maybe you found out, or you got a coupon from like Costco or Shutterfly, and they're having a deal on their 11 by 11 photo books where you get one for free and you just pay for shipping. You can do an 11 by 11. Okay, so the booklet, whatever size you want to do is up to you. You can have it be square, you can have it be 8.5 by 11. The booklet is up to you. It's just the board that I wanted a particular size. And again, that size being 11 by 17 or 24 by 36. Now you'll notice in this menu that I also have margins here, okay? And if I have this chain on, it means that if I change one, it changes all. So if you see on my screen, once I made that margin larger, you can now see what these pink and purple lines indicate. They are a margin. But the thing that's really different about margins in InDesign versus any other program is that these are just a graphic indication. It's not like Microsoft Word where I can't work past this line. These are just here as a graphic representation of what I want my margin to be, but I don't need to, it's not going to prevent me from working outside of these lines. So something to remember, okay? So again, all of this was under File, Document Setup. In Document Setup, you can change the size, facing pages, as well as the margins of your book or any document that you're working on. Okay. If you want to remove pages, what you can do is click on a page, right-click and go to Delete, or similar to Photoshop, you can drag it down to the trash bin. And let's say you want to delete a lot of pages. So that was easy for one. If you hold the Shift key down, it allows you to select more than one page. Okay, so again, Shift lets you grab more than one page to delete. I'm going to undo that by hitting Control-Z to bring those back. So now you know how to add and delete pages as well. We also talked about the facing pages layout. Okay, so this is a good time to hit pause and think about what size you want this document to be. Even though this is just your exercise, go ahead and play with those features. So how to change the size, how to add and delete pages, and then we're going to move on to the next part, which is frames. Okay. Just about everything we do in InDesign relies on something called a frame. Without frames, we essentially just have blank pages that don't have any sort of text or images in them. And I hope you guys took time at the beginning to pause and download the images, because at this point we're going to be talking about how to insert images in frames. And I'm actually going to skip down to pages 2 and 3 so we can do some side-by-side images. And what I'd also like to do right now, something that I didn't have in our checklist when we started that I'm going to add now, is talking about zooming in and out. So if you are in InDesign and you hit Control-0 or Command-0 if you're on an app, it does a zoom all on whatever page you're on. I wish it did the spread, but it doesn't. So what you can do to see the whole spread is if you hold the Alt key and rollerball in and out, it lets you zoom in and out. So again, that's just like Photoshop. So I'm holding the Alt key and I'm using my rollerball to go in and out so that I can see the entire spread. So I've got page 2 and 3 right here. And I'd like to use these to talk about how to insert frames. Okay, so with frames, the way that you add them is you hit F for frame, and you can see that my cursor turned into a plus sign. So again, F for frame, or V, just like V is where I always want to be, just like Photoshop. So that's nice that they have some of the same shortcuts. So here's the selection tool. This is where I want to be most of the time. But then F for frame switches into the frame tool. Okay. Now with the frame tool, you can click and drag. So click and drag, and you can kind of freehand a frame. Or on this side, I'm just going to click and let go. Click. And what that does is it brings up a dialog box where I put in how big I want the frame to be. So if I wanted a 4" by 4", I can make it a 4" by 4". So again, click. Let's make this one a 6" by 6. Or click and drag. That's the difference between the two. So if I keep clicking, it's going to keep trying to make these. So I hit escape to be done. And now to go back or to get out of this, I hit V again to get back into my selection tool. So F to get into frame, V to get out of it, or escape. Now that I have these frames, what I'm going to do is adjust them so that I only have one on each page and that they're both the same size. So you can click on a frame and hit delete. So I'm going to delete these two. So I'm clicking and I'm hitting the delete key. And then I'm going to click on this one and delete it too. Now starting with this one, I am going to move it, and you can see that there's something called Smart Guides built into InDesign. There it is, where it flashes these pink lines when I am centered. There we go. So that helps me find the absolute center. So get your frame to be a 6" by 6 and center it. Now one thing I should point out, this one was easy to put in as a 6" by 6, but here I just freehanded that. So how do I change this once it's in here? Well, if you look over at your properties, let me dance over here for a minute. Do you see where it says width and height? Okay, so if I click on this one, it changes. 6" by 6, let me click back on this one. 4 by something by 5 by something. So I can come here and do 6, and then I'm going to hit the tab key to move down to the next part. 6, enter. And now I can move it. So I'm looking for my guides. There's the center right there. So again, just to recap, you can click on any frame and you can see its width and height here. Now to change it, again, I'm going to do 4, tab, 4, enter, and that automatically puts it in. I'm going to hit undo so I get a 6" by 6. So now I've got these two 6" by 6" frames. Go ahead and pause so that you can get two 6" by 6" frames centered in your project as well. And then we're going to come back and learn about how to put images inside these frames as well. All right, welcome back. What we're going to do now is put images inside of these frames. So to put images inside frames, you have to do something called placing images. And before you place an image, what I like to do first is to click on the frame. So this is essentially the placeholder for the image. That's how we're going to start. So to do that, we're going to click on the frame, and the shortcut is Control or Command D. Now I have no idea why they chose Command D for placing an image, so I'm going up to File, Place. I like to just say duh. That's how I remember it, like duh, that's how you put something in there. So placing an image is Control or Command D. So I'm going to click on this again and go to Command D. And what it's looking for is it wants to know, okay, what file do you want to put in here? So at the beginning, I asked you guys to save your images in a place where you can find. So if you need to pause, try to remember where you saved those, or if you forgot to save them, go ahead and do that. And I am going to go ahead and find mine in Digital Graphics, Images for InDesign. So all of ours are going to be a little bit different depending on where we save them. For all I know, yours could be stuck in your downloads folder. But to start, we are going to start with one Villa Savoy JPEG. So one Villa Savoy is what we're going to start with. And if you have your image, go ahead and hit open. And let's talk about what we see here. So again, at any point, if you need to pause, please pause. And I'm going to talk about this image right here. So what we've seen is it took the image. I'm going to go back to the preview of it so you can see what it's supposed to look like. So I know this is a really small preview, but that gives you an idea of what the image should look like. And if I pull this down, you can see that it's absolutely being cut off to fit in the frame. So here's what's happening. When you have your cursor, do you guys notice that when I place my cursor over the image, this little white circle pops up and then a hand pops up? Click on it, it's like giving yourself a little high five. And now I have activated the image. Okay, so now I can move the image inside the frame. So what on earth is happening here? We have two different images and image frames. So this first outline, which is kind of this orangish brownish color, that's the actual image. And this blue frame is what's actually holding the image and cropping it, for lack of a better term. So what we can do, I'm going to click off of it again, and let's notice my properties menu. Let's notice our properties menu to begin with. So if I am clicked off of this, so V for selection, you can see my cursor, this is what my properties looks like. Click on the image again, and you can see that your properties menu updates so that you can work on your image now. Do you see that this new frame fitting popped up? Frame fitting is what I'm looking for. So, sorry, I didn't mean to click on that. So this first one is fill frame proportionately. Go ahead and click on that one. What that did is you can see it shrunk it down so that it filled this frame proportionately. Now if I click on the next one, which is fit content proportionately, it's going to take the image and fit it inside my frame. So I'm going to go back and forth between these two right here. Now, which one do you use? It's totally up to you. If you had a layout where you just wanted to have the same size of picture over and over again to keep it consistent, this first one works to fill the frame proportionately. But let's say that you're working on a portfolio or something for a client and this is a floor plan and you can see where your floor plan's being cut off. If you need all of the information, go ahead and fit the content proportionately, right? And then after you fit the content proportionately, instead of having kind of these sloppy frame edges hanging off the side, you can do one more thing. One of these buttons allows you to fit frame to the content. Hopefully you can see where I'm pushing. So when I click on that, do you see that the frame automatically wrapped itself around the content? Okay, that's what I'm looking for here. So go ahead and pause and do that again if you need to. And then we're going to move on and do this one right here. So with this one, try to remember a shortcut. How do we remember it? Duh, this is how we put it in. So I'm going to do Command D again. And then this time I'm going to do the 3 Villa Savoy. Okay, I'm going to hit open. And if I click on it, you can see that once again, it's kind of changed the proportions of it. So I've got the main frame that's going to crop your view. And then I've got what's known, it's this same thing, the direct selection tool that shows me the image as well. So what I'd like to do now is go ahead and fill the frame proportionately. And then once I've done that, I'm going to do the same thing where I fit frame to content so that my staircase isn't being cropped. So try that as well. And now before we get too far, I want to talk about the view settings on your screen. It might not be very obvious right now, but once you start working on your own projects, you'll definitely notice this. So on my screen, can you see how this staircase looks like it's really pixelated? What's happening is if you right-click on your screen, there is something called Display Performance. And by default, yours is probably set to Typical Display, but it should be set to, if you want to see what it looks like, change it to High Quality Display, okay? And what that does is it shows you the actual pixels of your file rather than just a preview. Now, InDesign can be really graphically heavy. So right now we only have 2 images, but once you start working on your final with your board, you're going to have, a dozen or so images. So your graphic card might start having a hard time. So to help your graphic card, what you can do is change your display performance to Typical Display, and it reduces the output of the images so you can work a little bit faster. But if you're worried about your images looking pixelated, change the display performance to High Quality, and if it still looks pixelated, then we'll have to take a look at what's going on with your images. So let's do this. On this image right here, I want to click on it and take a look at my properties. So it's a 6 by 8 image, and the number that I really want to focus on right now is this percentage. So it's at 115% of its original size. Let me test the one next to it. So this one is only at 42% of its original size. So what's happening with this one is the original size should be 100%. But I'm taking that image and I'm stretching it an additional 15%. And that's when things start to get pixelated. So what I want to do is make sure that when you put in your images, you keep them at 100% or smaller. Worst case scenario, maybe 105%. Okay? So I'm changing this back to 100%. And then once I've changed it to 100%, I'm going to fix the frame. So fit frame to content. And then I'm going to recenter it. Okay? So I'm going to play with that idea. So here, again, we're only at 42. I'm going to take this up to 150. And then I can even move it. So do you see at 150 how pixelated this gets? So just because you can make it larger in your frame doesn't mean that you should. Okay? Don't stretch the pixels because it will distort the image. Okay? And then again, to make this fit again, I'm going to go to Fit Content Proportionately. So go ahead and pause, rewind if you need to, and play with that concept a little bit as well.